Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming out to this cybersecurity defense in depth. I'm going to bring actually my co-host on today. We got James and myself here from TCU Alliance. James, how are you doing?
Doing great, Brandon. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. There's a lot going on in the cybersecurity industry.
Sure is. And everyone's still at home sucking in the lockdown, but with the good news in the province of Ontario, where we are, it looks like we're going to be staging out over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. How long do you think this is going to last, James? Just between you and I.
I would have, what? Everyone's going to hate me in this room, but I would say probably to the end of this year.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Now everyone that's watching, I hope you're home safe. I hope you're, healthy, safe, and, working really well, or, looking, a lot of people are talking about changing careers in cybersecurity and moving up. So hopefully you guys are here to learn a lot of great information. We got some great speakers today. We did have a cancellation last minute. We were trying to collaborate with one company and a couple of colleagues that ran into some technical difficulties at the last moment, just wasn't able to make it. So we got, one of the speakers last minute stepped up, is going to be talking about the CMMC and I'll give you a little bit of their bios. So James, is there anything else you want to cover before we jump in here?
No, pretty much all good. Thank you very much for everyone's attendance this evening. And we're looking forward to having you here and discussing about this show and our future coming shows. And you're more than welcome to participate. Thanks for being here. All yours, Brandon.
Thank you. So today, what we're going to be doing is a little bit of overview. We're going to have 3 presentations, but today we're going to actually have 2 presentations. This meetup group is actually live and recorded. So if you miss it or you have a colleague or friend that potentially is going to miss it, let them know. They can watch it on YouTube. It's going to be on YouTube channel. Probably it's going to be recorded right after and live there, but we're going to do some edits. You guys will be able to see different snippets and things that you can share later through your community. You guys have access to the chat. There's a chat on YouTube, on Twitch. You can go in, ask the speakers questions live. They want to be engaging, interactive. So make sure you ask lots of questions of the topic. Anything that you have questions about their technology, the system solutions, future growth, anything along that line, ask lots of questions. They're here to just educate you on the community, on their solution and what they're doing. So we want to make sure you guys get lots of value. With that being said, let me kind of go into the first speaker of tonight. Chris Golden is a retired colonel from the USAF. He spent over 2 decades in uniform in various flying staff and command assignments. He retired and moved on to work cybersecurity for Wall Street and now runs cybersecurity for Blue Cross Blue Shield. He's founding board member of the CMMC AB, and a nonprofit organization dedicated to implementing the CMMC program for the DoD. So I'm sure you guys are hearing a lot about it. Chris is going to clarify a lot of that information for you. Chris holds an undergrad degree in computer science from the University of Miami and 2 master degrees. Additionally, he holds many industry certifications such as CISSP, CISA, and the Certified Blockchain Security Professional. He has published and spoke on third-party risk management and considered an international expert on the topic. In his spare time, Chris enjoys flying his Yak 52 and scuba diving. So Chris is going to be our first speaker. The next speakers that we're going to have is Jason and his colleagues. So I'll first go over Jason's bio here. Jason Longo brings 20 years of experience supporting the missions of the U.S. federal government before joining Averchex to start their U.S. federal practice. He was the first federal hire in Nutanix, focused on growing their adoption across the entire U.S. federal government. Prior to Nutanix, Jason was a virtualization consultant serving the U.S. Department of Defense in both the Consensus and I'll get him to pronounce that, so I'm going to mess that up. CONUS and OCONUS initiatives. Longon was VMware Certified Design Expert number 54, as well as a published author and virtual desktop infrastructure. Jason is based in Washington, D.C. area. So a lot of information you're going to get there. And just give me a second. I'm going to pull up Muhammad Alam, and he's our high technical guy on this talk today. He's a principal solution architect in Averchex. He primarily works with enterprise customers and public sector organizations to help them in their journey to public cloud from networking and security perspective. He is a domain expert in cloud networking and security across AWS, Azure, GCP, and OCI. Prior to Avertrax, Hammond was leading a team of solution architects at VMware for NSX and Kubernetes products. Hammond has worked at Microsoft and Riverbed earlier in his career. He holds Avertrax designed experts, VMware, VCDX, AWS, Azure, GCP, network especially, and architectural certifications. Whew, that's a mouthful. So with that being said, I'm going to bring on Chris here, get Chris ready. So Chris, you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Awesome. So guys, remember, if you guys have any questions, let Chris know. And Chris, you're up.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Brandon and James. Appreciate the invitation. Yeah, happy to jump on sort of short notice and try to help everybody out. Tough couple resumes there to follow. So hopefully I can provide some value here. For those of you that don't know what CMMC is, we'll get to that in a minute. But my role on the board has been basically the training sort of guy. I've created the training for the provisional assessors that are getting ready to go out and start doing assessments for CMMC. I've trained over 100 provisional assessors plus a number of assessors from the government side on the DCMA DibCap. And so that's sort of been my role on the board. So if anybody's got certain questions about training, I'll be trying to happy to answer them, and we'll move on through the rest of it. But anyway, so we'll talk about these kind of things. What is the cybersecurity model certification? We'll talk about the model, practices, and processes, which is sort of unique for CMMC, and then the actual assessment that'll happen. And then for you all that might think you will have a CMMC requirement in a US DoD contract, we'll talk about some of your current activities you should be doing, trying to identify sensitive data on your network, scoping, shared infrastructure, and reciprocity, and then we'll hopefully leave some time for Q&A. As Brandon said, feel free to interrupt me. I'm the way this works, I'm seeing my screen, so I'm not seeing the chat, but if you type a question in the chat, Brandon will stop me, and I'll try to answer it real time as we're going through. Okay, so why CMMC? The U.S. Department of Defense estimates that we're losing about $600 billion, that's with a B, in intellectual property theft each year. If you look at those two pictures, one is the United States F-35 aircraft, and the other is the Chinese FC-31. Do they look similar to you? Because they look awful similar to me. So the question is, how did that happen, right? And so most people think, in fact, it's probably been proved now that the bad guys basically broke into the supply chain and started, figuring out who's building the tires and who's building the radar and who's building the tail, excuse me, and broke into those companies rather than trying to break into the big bad DoD. It's a little bit tougher to do that, but breaking into some of these companies is very easy. And certainly when you go downstream into these subcontractor tiers, the tier 8 or tier 9 sub that's a mom and pop shop is probably very easy to break into and then swim upstream to find what you're needing. And so that's what we've seen sort of the bad guys doing it. Currently, for those of you that are in the U.S. defense contracting world, there's something called NIST Special Publication 800 TAC 171, and it is mainly a self-attestation thing. You say, yep, I'm going to be certified and in compliant with NIST 171 requirements. Some people do, some people do not. And so that's going to be a wide awakening for many contractors that don't follow it. If they've been following it, it's a very easy migration, frankly, pretty cheap and pretty short time frame to jump from 171 over to CMMC. But if you have not been doing that, if you've been sort of lying to the government, then this is going to be a pretty big wake-up call, because now we're going to send an assessor on site to visit with you and shine a big bright light in your eye and see how you're doing. Same with lower level DFARS-based requirements. So no matter what kind of contract you have with the U.S. Department of Defense, there are some level of cybersecurity responsibilities you have. If it's not 171, then it's something in the DFARS, which is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations. So 871 was really not working too well. There were still a lot of theft going on, et cetera, et cetera. So the DoD decided they wanted something that had teeth in it, and that's sort of why they created the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. Okay, so down for all U.S. defense contractors, it was going to require them to successfully complete an assessment once every 3 years. The level of assessment we'll talk about a little bit later, but basically it's a snapshot in time, right? We are certainly thinking about some kind of continuous monitoring solutions to give us more of a motion picture of what's going on inside the defense contractor versus that one snapshot every 3 years. But we're still sort of working our way through that. But that's the plan right now, is to have an idea of sort of what's going on behind the firewall. So if any major changes happen, like going from on-prem to 100% cloud or something like that, maybe we get notified of that, and we can come back and ask some hard questions about your security program. Conducted by an independent third party, right? So somebody, basically right now, people I have trained to come do this. No more self-attestation. You don't get to say, hey, we're good, and just write a letter and the government accepts it. The audit is pass-fail with a small grace period to identify gaps. No POAMs. For those of you who aren't sure, a POAM is a program objective and milestones, is what the acronym means. And so it basically says, hey, I don't encrypt data now, but here's my plan on how I'm going to encrypt data and how long it's going to take and all that kind of stuff. Right now, you can write a POAM like that, and that is okay for NIST 171. It will not work for CMMC. You'll fail the assessment at that point and waste a lot of time and money, and you will not be able to bid and or win government contracts with a failed CMMC assessment. If you do have a little thing that needs to be addressed, like maybe you don't have quite the right policy writing or something like that, again, we'll give you a little grace period to take a look at that stuff and try to fix those things, about 90 days. But you got to bring the same assessor back to do that sort of delta assessment to make sure you're good to go before they pass you. And you must achieve the correct CMMC level prior to the contract award. We think in about 3 or 4 years, once most companies have achieved a CMMC level of some kind, that will be changed to bid, meaning you won't be allowed to bid on a contract until you have achieved a certain CMMC level. So that's something we think is going to change. But right now it's prior to award because, frankly, nobody has it. We haven't started assessments yet, so people are unsure what to do, and we haven't certified anybody. So it's going to be at contract award for right now. Okay. The model is based on several existing cyber frameworks, from NIST to ISO to the DFARS and a number of different country ones, to include our friends up there in Canada. And it's a combined best practices from around the globe. It combines a cyber practice model with a maturity model. So that's sort of an interesting thing about CMMC that you don't see many other places. So there are 5 levels for both cyber practices and the maturity processes. You've got to meet both the controls and the maturity for each CMMC level. So for instance, a level 2, there's about 55 controls or something like that, and there's process maturity is defined as documented. So you have to have a policy that says how you're going to implement those 55 controls. If you don't do both of those, you can't get a level 2. You might get a level 1 because you've met all the things for that, but you won't get a level 2 unless you have all the practices done and all the processes for the maturity. Plus, the model is cumulative. So what's that mean? It means if you're going for a level 3, you also have to meet the levels 1 and 2 requirements to get a level 3 requirement. You can't just shoot for level 3 and walk away. You're going to have to do everything below that as well, of the 5 levels. So if you're a level 5, you are actually meeting all the requirements for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, the model covers 17 domains across cybersecurity. There are 5 different security posture levels and 5 different maturity levels, controls, and processes, like we just talked about. Okay, here's an idea of sort of what we're looking at. If you look sort of on the left side under practices, starting at level 1, it's basically defined as basic cyber hygiene, right? This is for companies that really don't have any cyber hygiene. Maybe they don't even have an IT shop. Maybe it's all outsourced. Maybe it's 4 or 5 gals and guys in a garage with a golden retriever trying to figure out how to do contracting or whatever. They don't really have anything. So we're trying to build them up to a basic level of cyber hygiene. Level 2 is intermediate cyber hygiene. 3 is good cyber hygiene. 4 is considered proactive, and 5 is advanced or progressive. So those are just the practices, right? The things you have to do to protect data. If you look over on the right side under the processes, again, starting at level 1 is really just performed. Do you do it or not? There's really no other things that have to be demonstrated to the assessor at level 1. If you have to encrypt data, do you encrypt data? Yes, no. You don't have to have a policy for it or anything like that. You just have to do it. Once you get up to level 2, again, we talked about this. This is documented. We're all interpreting that as sort of policies. You've got some policies for all these different controls and practices you've got to put in place. Level 3 becomes a little more complex. You have to be managed. We define that as a plan. So that plan has to be there ready. So how you're going to do that, it's got to talk about resourcing. So how you're going to fund that level of work. What kind of people are you going to hire? What skills and certifications and training do they need to do their job, et cetera, et cetera. That's what managed means. And then as we get up a little bit higher, again, reviewed, basically collecting metrics and then optimizing, using those metrics to make your process a little bit better. If you look sort of in this, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, one question from the audience.
Sure.
Lucian's asking, what is good cyber hygiene? Can you define that for?
It means you're doing the 130 controls and the process maturity of managed at CMMC is really what it means. Yeah, there's really no specific definition on basic, intermediate, good. They just sort of threw that out there. Johns Hopkins Advanced Physics Lab and the folks from MITRE and the folks from the Software Engineering Institute were the ones that sort of developed the model for the DoD. Yeah, I've talked to them about this before. They've got no rhyme or reason. But good cyber hygiene is just that. There's 130 controls there for level 3, so you're doing all 130 controls, plus you are managing them in the process side of the house well enough to execute them at that level, but there's really no specific definition between basic, intermediate, and good. They're just getting more complex and more numerous as we go up the model. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, if you guys have any more questions, please just put them in the chat.
Yep. Going back to the slide here, look in the middle there. There's two acronyms there, FCI and CUI on the bottom for level 1 and level 2. FCI is federal contract information. And that's basically any information that's put in a defense contract that is not intended for public consumption, right? It could be cost, right? Maybe the DoD doesn't want to know how much the rest of the world to know how much they're paying you. It could be schedules. It could be integration requirements. It could be a whole different things, but anything that's put in the contract that is not intended for public disclosure. And then CUI is controlled but unclassified information, right? We're not into the world of classified information. We're not at the secret or top secret level or anything like that. This is still unclassified information, yet it's sensitive. The type of radar absorbent material that we're going to paint the airplane in, maybe that is unclassified, but it's sensitive. It still needs to be protected. It just hasn't reached the point of being secret or top secret. If you notice, level 1 is primarily for FCI companies. So those companies that are doing basic things for the government, and they really don't have CUI in their systems, but they just need to protect that contract information. Level 2, we don't really expect to ever show up in a DoD contract. It is really a bridging solution for companies to get from 1 to 3, because there's a huge gap between the 17 controls at level 1 and the 130 controls at level 3. And so that's really what level 2 is from. Companies may choose to use level 2 as a bridging solution as they make their journey towards level 3 is really what we think that's going to be for. But even companies that do achieve a level 2 still are only handling FCI. They are not handling CUI at that point. So if you do handle CUI, the minimum level you're going to have to attain is a CMMC level 3 to handle controlled but unclassified information. But if you're never going to handle that, most likely you're going to be a level 1. And we think right now there's about 350,000 companies in the U.S. DoD supply chain. And of those, well over 300,000 will probably only ever be level 1. Maybe 30,000 might be at level 3, and then there will be just a very small percentage, probably less than 1% total, that will ever be at 4 or 5. But that's why they broke the model into these sort of bifurcated top and bottom for FCI and CUI. And then if you only have FCI, again, you're only at level 1. If you have CUI, you have to be a minimum of level 3. Okay. Here are the 17 domains. I'm not going to read it to you, but they cover mostly the things you would think about for cybersecurity, right? I've been doing cyber for quite some time. I think probably most of you all have. Certainly the people putting on the show and talking after me have. So nothing really spectacular here. It's common sense for most things. But risk management is new. That was really not in the NIST Special Publication 800 TAC 171. But what people thought, hey, you need to be able to do it. You need to be able to monitor your own risk, talk about it, do things about it, make decisions on it. So they added it to the model. But those are the 17 domains that make up the CMMC model. Okay, let's focus in on level 1 round, just to give you a little bit more idea, right? Vast majority of companies will be level 1. We're not going to see a huge number of level 3s. Introduces basic cyber hygiene for those who have little or none. Or again, you talk about a company, maybe 10 or 20 employees, no IT shop, no cyber shop, no security shop, anything like that. And then we've got to sort of raise them up to a level where they can at least protect basic kind of data. Of those 17 domains, only 6 are covered in level 1. There are 17 controls that need to be demonstrated for the assessor when the assessor rolls in to do the assessment. There are no maturity processes. Again, it's just doing it. We call it the Nike level, right? You just got to do it. And again, it's designed to protect that FCI stuff. So those are the ones for level 1. And there it is on that model we looked at a little bit earlier. Okay, level 2. Moving up the chain now, get a little more complicated. Again, it's a bridging solution. We really don't expect DoD to issue contracts that say you must be CMMC level 2 to bid or win this contract. We think it's a bridging solution from 1 to 3. So those companies that, for whatever business reason, decide, yep, we need to be at level 3 for competitive reasons, and they're maybe at that level 1 or maybe even below that, this is a good way to help them get to level 3. Most of the controls in level 3 processes, again, are documented, still not allowed to handle that CUI stuff. So even though in the model, if you read it, there is references to CUI, they are notional, meaning like if they had CUI, how would they protect it in this situation is what you'll see in the model, but they're still not allowed to handle or store or process CUI until they become level 3. So level 2 is still just at the FCI level. Moving from basic to intermediate, now we're covering 15 domains, and we've moved up to 72 controls. And the process maturity is documented. Again, the way we interpret that is basically a policy, right? So you don't have to have one policy for every single control. If you had an acceptable use policy or an information security policy or a work from home policy, you're probably covering multiple controls and multiple domains in those documents. So we're not expecting the assessors to roll in and look for 72 different policies. There'll be one policy like AUP that's got maybe 20 or 30 of these in there, maybe even more, depending on how you write it. But that can be a waste of time to have 72 individual policies. But you could if you wanted to. That's certainly one way to skin the cat. Again, the model is cumulative, right? So you've got the 17 practices from level 1, you've got the 55 practices for level 2, and when you add those together, you come up with the 72 practices for the total in level 2, because the model is cumulative. Okay, those are the additions, or I'm sorry, the blue ones are the subtractions for the level 2 assessments. Covers 15 of the 17 domains. Okay, level 3, where we're getting a little bit more advanced now. Movement from intermediate to good, covers 16 of the domains, so one more from level 2, has a total of 130 controls, and the maturity process evaluates to managed. And again, we talked about managed as having a plan to implement all those 130 controls. So there it is in the big map. We're now into the CUI world, so if you're handling CUI, this is where you need to be shooting for. Again, cumulative, so 17 plus 55 plus 58 brings you up to the 130. And all of them but personnel security are covered in this level. Four and 5 is some guesses on our part. The DoD has not released any of the training materials or the assessment guides or anything like that for level 5, so we're sort of guessing, but we have a pretty good idea based on what they did for 1, 2, and 3 as to what that's going to be. Again, proactive, we think, is, you're going to see some advanced stuff, maybe a security operations center, stuff like that. Level 5, you're going to see advanced threat hunting, you're going to see sandboxing, you're going to see honeypots, you're going to see all those kind of things. And then over on the process side, managed, meaning you have a plan, reviewed, meaning probably you're collecting some kind of metrics about your program and optimizing, you're using those metrics to make your processes better. Okay, so let's jump into what we call the OSCs, the Organizations Seeking Certification. This is a pseudo-military program on our part, so of course we've got to use acronyms. And so that's the defense contractor that's wanting to have a contract with the Department of Defense and having to go through a CMMC assessment. So they will contract with what we call a CMMC third-party assessment organization, a C3PAO. If any of you are familiar with the FedRAMP process, that probably looks familiar. And I'm pretty sure that's where the DoD stole it from. So that's probably the exact same thing. The C3PAOs, and I think we've got 20 to 40 that are approved in the ecosystem. If you go to the website, cmmcab.org, there's a marketplace there. You can see who all we've approved to be in the ecosystem from the C3PO and the assessors level. But anyway, they'll have trained and certified assessors or the auditors. Again, I've trained the first 100 or so provisional assessors. We call them provisional because it was dumb people like me that created the test and the training program, and it's never been certified by real people that have done that before. And so as we're getting the formal training stood up and the formal exams done and psychometric and all that kind of stuff you have to have done to that stuff, we're still needing to pump out assessors. So that's why we're calling them provisional, is because people like me did it instead of just some professional kind of guy. Probably a contract with the C3PO and the OSC. We'll talk about the scope of the assessment, right? What systems are in scope, what systems are not in scope, the timing, what artifacts they want to see, personnel and interviews, and then obviously cost. We're really not going to get in the middle of that as the AB. That's really just something between the C3PAOs and the OSCs. Obviously, the assessors will coordinate and plan with you prior to an on-site visit. This is it should look, feel, smell, taste, and touch very similar to any kind of external audit you had. So if you've had a SOC 2 Type 2, or if you had an ISO, or any other kind of big external audit, it's going to look and feel very, very similar to that. If you're a larger organization with multiple sites, you might have an assessment team. If you're a very small organization with just one little office or maybe a garage, you'll probably have one assessor come take a look at you maybe for a few hours. It won't be very long at all. So it really depends on the scope as to how many people will come visit you and how big and long it'll take. Expect a kickoff meeting, right? That's the assessment assessor or the assessment team will come and sort of tell you what's going on and how it's all going to work. Maybe a daily wrap-up meeting every day, sort of say, okay, here's where we are. Here's the sort of things we found. Do you have any questions about these? We need more information on XYZ. Please help us out. And then a final out brief when the assessment is complete to let you know sort of where you fall in the pass-fail world. Issues should be handled in about near real time, right? We don't want anybody to have any surprises, both on the assessor side and on the company side. So if there's something that's not quite right, you should be hearing about it very, very quickly. The assessor should be coming to you as either the sort of the program manager that's running the assessment for the company or as a stakeholder in sort of the senior leadership and trying to say, hey, we're not seeing enough here to pass you on this. Let's talk about it and figure out what we can do. If eligible, you'll receive your score before the assessors depart. And if required, there will be a list of actions to meet the standard and next step. Again, that short window complete, we think is going to be 90 days. So maybe you didn't have, again, a policy written for one of the practices. Now you've got 90 days to go write that policy and get it sort of implemented in your organization, however you all choose to do that. Okay, preparation. This is just my recommendations, right? This is not official DoD, policy. This is not CMMC AB policy. This is just, sort of common sense. I've done a lot of work in the third-party risk space my entire career, and so these are things I'm just saying that are pretty good to go, but they're just recommendations. They are not can be considered gospel. Okay, so current activities. If you do have a DoD contract, there is something you are required to comply with right now, whether it's in the DFARS, whether it's a 171 requirement, it could be an ISO requirement. There is something in your contract that says you have to protect data, and here's what you have to do. You should do that, right? That you should be doing that right now, regardless of sort of, how painful it is or how much it costs. You are telling the government, yes, I am in compliance with one of these kind of things, and it's going to be a very wide awake phone call you get, when the assessors come in and you haven't been doing it. So whatever you are supposed to be doing now, prior to CMMC rolling out full bang, do it, whatever that is. The DFARS, basically the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulators, pretty closely associate themselves to CMMC level 1. It's almost a one-for-one model. And so again, if you have a DFARS clause in your thing and you are doing it, that movement to a CMMC level 1 assessment certification is going to be very easy, very low lift, and frankly, very cheap probably as well. If you have a NIST 800 TAC 171 requirement, that is almost CMMC level 3. We've added 20 Delta controls, we call them new controls to the 110 that are in 171. And of course, we've added the process levels of both 2, which is managed, and 3, which is, 2, which is documented, and 3, which is managed. So there are some differences. Again, if you are compliant with NIST 171 right now, it's not that big a leap. Adding those 20 controls, adding some documentation, adding some planning is not a huge leap for most companies. But if you've been whitewashing this, be very, very careful how you go into your CMMC assessment. Begin taking your company's cybersecurity possibly seriously, right? HR, AP, AR, Sarbanes-Oxley, some of these things may be happening. I get in a fight all the time with our corporate communications people because they want to send out links for people to click on. I'm like, well, that's the exact behavior the enemy wants the employees to take. Just click on any link that comes to them. So we're constantly sort of in that battle with some of these people to take cybersecurity posture seriously. So, think about how you're doing it now and how you may want to change it in the future. Okay, I think the next step is identify where that sensitive data is going to be on your network, right? There's 2 kinds, FCI and CUI, in the eyes of the U.S. Department of Defense, and it's designed to prevent the leakage or theft of that data. So how do you get that data? Where does it go? All those kind of questions you got to ask. And those are not very necessarily easy questions to answer. Most of it probably comes in via email, but you could have somebody fax something to you and somebody scans that in. You could have a, FTP, MFT. There could be lots of different ways for this data to enter your system. So you got to sort of go back to the business process owners and go, hey, how does this data get to us and where can it go? What about your own proprietary data, right? If we're raising the level of cybersecurity for your company for the Department of Defense reasons, well, we're also raising it for your company overall. So maybe there's some proprietary data that's sensitive in nature that you want to protect as well. This is a good model to help protect that data as well. And then identify the sensitive data that allows the next specs to be based on cost and effort. So once you sort of figure it out, then the other parts come pretty simple. So scoping, how do we want to scope this thing? Protecting data incurs cost and effort, right? Do we protect $100 worth of data with a $10,000 tool? Of course not. We got to figure out how to do this right and do it in a cost-effective way. So we want to place the effort and pay the cost to protect the data that is required to be protected. So if that data does not sit on the HR system and has no way to get there, it is logically and or physically separated from that environment, then let's take that out of scope, because that's going to reduce the size of the thing that has to get assessed and make it a little bit easier on everybody else. For those of you who are familiar with PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, that's what most of these companies that have a PCI DSS requirement do, is they only have 1 or 2 servers and 4 or 5 laptops that actually process credit card data. And so that's the system. So when their PCI DSS audit is up and coming to them, that's the only thing their auditor is looking at, is just those systems. They're not looking at the enterprise system. They're not looking at the customer management. They're not looking at enterprise risk. They're not looking at anything but just those systems that are in scope for the credit card. I think you're going to see the CMMC model go the same way. Many companies should start limiting the number of systems that have access to that kind of data, either at the FCI level or the CUI level, to make that as minimal a footprint as possible, to make the assessment so much easier. And now everybody sort of knows where everything is. Shared infrastructure. This is something we've heard some of the bigger primes, the bigger contractors, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Raytheon's, talk about. Is okay, they've gone through a CMMC level 3 assessment, and now you're a sub that's providing a bolt or a some kind of paint or whatever, to their big prime contract. Maybe they just loan you their infrastructure, right? Maybe they give you a level 3 laptop and go, hey, we're going to exchange CUI, but it's going to be on our devices and our networks. Don't connect this laptop to your network. Keep it separate. And then we'll just have the conversations we need to have on that one laptop. That's where we'll exchange information. We think that's probably a way a lot of the primes might go, especially with some of their very small subs that can't meet a CUI, let's say, or requirement at level 3. This might be a good way for them to do that. Just give them that laptop for a year, update it when it gets updated, push all your patching out and all your controls, all the things you do to achieve your level 3, just allow them to use that infrastructure, and makes life easier on everybody. But we've heard that from some of the primes already. Reciprocity is still being worked. It is unknown at this point, but we certainly expect the DoD to do it, because the DoD has said publicly many times they want to give you credit for things that you have already paid for, right? And so FedRAMP is certainly a great example. So if you have a cloud provider that is providing you FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high services, that cloud provider has already gone through a FedRAMP assessment. It's already been paid for and done by somebody probably at DCMA DIBCAT, and you're using some of their controls for your, let's say, cloud storage. You should get credit for that, right? And so that's where reciprocity is going to come in. Hasn't been decided, but we think, there will be, of let's say the access controls there at level 1, there's 4 of them. Maybe FedRAMP achieves 2 of them. And so now the assessor's only going to look at the other 2 that would be done by you locally. They're not going to look at the 2 that are basically giving credit or inherited by you using a FedRAMP certified thing. We expect it to also go to ISO, probably not SOC 2 Type 2, but that could be a stretch. But there should be some other major ones out there that most of the defense community, defense contractor community uses, that will get credit for doing that stuff, so they don't have to sort of do it again. And I think that's a pretty good way to go. Okay. Open up for Q&A here. There's my name, number, email, and website if anybody's interested. Again, I've been doing third-party risk management for quite some time, and now into the CMMC stuff, as well as the NIST 800-171 in interim final rule, which always sounds like an oxymoron when it comes out of my mouth. But if anybody's got questions, comments, happy to hear them. If you got something else, shoot me a note, and we'll talk about it when I get it.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for the presentation, the CMMC. Take that.
My pleasure.
So, hey guys, anyone that's watching right now, do you guys have any questions about the CMMC program? Anything for Chris? One question I have for you, Chris. So, being a Canadian, what does that mean for people that are outside the U.S.?
So we believe that because the U.S. DoD supply chain is global in nature, that this will rapidly spread to other countries. We've certainly already had talks with the Ministry of Defense up there in the north in Canada, and they are looking at how this is going to be implemented in them. So I would anticipate, but I don't know this, that the Ministry of Defense in Canada would probably say, okay, for the Ministry of Defense, Canadian Ministry of Defense supply chain, you all also have to be compliant with CMMC, and they'll roll out their own version of this. It may leverage the accreditation body in terms of doing assessors and C3POs and all that kind of stuff, or they may create their own. Frankly, I don't know. But since the supply chain is global, we certainly expect this to go global at some point.
Okay, so it's just kind of the same thing as ISO, NIST, kind of that framework. It's kind of starts to become a global framework, right? And compliance that people start to implement.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. You had something else, Chris?
No, I was just to say, when you look at, like the F-35, which is one of the pictures I had up in the front, it's made in like 14 different countries, right? So those countries that are contributing to the building of that airplane will have to be CMMC, what level, whatever, at some point in their career, just because they are in Germany or Italy or England or Canada or Australia, or wherever they happen to be, really won't change that fact from happening. But I think the local governments will realize that this is a pretty good model and they'll start implementing it as well.
Now, what do you think is the timelines right now for people to actually look at this? I know it's a new initiative, but if I was at XYZ company, when should I start looking at, my CMC certification?
Yeah, great question. The DoD has released the first, I think it's 12 pilot programs, they're calling it. I don't have it in front of me, but if you Google CMMC pilot programs, you'll probably get a pretty good list. And those are going to be the first contracts that should be released either later this month or early in March, that will actually have a CMMC requirement in the contract. And so then anybody that bids on those contracts, assuming we've got 12 and there's 4 or 5 bidders per, you're talking about 100 companies plus some subs. We sort of built the ecosystem to handle about 500 assessments in the next few months, to handle that demand signal. And so, if you think you might be in the hopper for those pilot contracts, then it's going to be sooner rather than later. If you're not in that sort of first tranche, you've got some time, because the second tranche won't come out probably till the new FY, which would be October 1st. Here in the United States for the new fiscal year for the DoD, and it'll be a little bit bigger tranche, right? We're talking about 12 now. It might go to 50 or 60 in the next tranche, and so again, a very limited scope compared to the 350,000 that we'll be doing eventually. But again, if you're not going to be in those, and we have no clue what those ones are going to look like, then you probably got at least a year, maybe 2, before you really have to be very concerned with CMMC. But the new interim final rule certainly has put some teeth in the NIST 171 clause. So if you have that clause in your contract, that is going to change your life just a little bit as well.
Okay. So now I'm a company X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go out looking for these qualified people. Where do I find them to be able to get the right assessors, that it's not someone that has gone through some sort of just online platform, downloaded the information with fire hose, and then say, hey, I'm CMMC expert. How do I get someone that's qualified?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things here. There's the consulting side of the house, which is people that want to, help people get ready, right? So I could consult for anybody here. If you had some questions, we could form a consulting agreement and I could help you. I cannot now assess you, right? We've got a big, thick black line, a big Chinese wall between those two. We can't have that kind of conflict between the person assessing a company and the person consulting for that company to help them get ready. So on the consulting side, we have something called the RP or RPO program, which are registered providers or registered provider organizations. And those are simply consultants that have gone through, frankly, a day of our training and passed a test to understand basically what I just told you. They understand the model, they understand how it works, they understand the ecosystem, so they should be in a better position to help you than anybody else you choose that has not gone through the program. Now, that being said, you can pick anybody you want. If you are have been working with, Tom, Dick, and Harry's bait shop and cybersecurity consulting down the street from you and have a long-lasting relationship, by all means, do that. But we thought it was important to have people at least understood the model and understood the thing. And so those people, you can see they've got a little digital badge on their website or on their LinkedIn page that shows they've been through the RP training. So now we jump out of the consulting, we get to the assessing side of the house. You can only be assessed by a certified assessor, which we haven't got yet, but the provisional assessors we do have, I've trained them, and a C3PO, and those are listed on our marketplace. So if you go to the website, again, it's cmmcab.org, go to the marketplace, then you'll see some C3POs and some provisional assessors, et cetera, et cetera. So once you realize, hey, I am going to bid on one of those pilot contracts, I do need an assessment, you would start working then on that web page, that marketplace, for the C3PO and then the assessor to do your assessment.
Okay, perfect. And then I got a question here. Let me bring this up. Terra Nova Defense. Is it advisable that CMMC L4, L5 companies only deal with CMMC companies like ISO companies do with one another?
No, not necessarily. Again, so basically why there are 5 different levels is certain data needs to be protected in a different way, right? And so instead of just protecting all data at the highest level, which has a tremendous cost disadvantage and obviously time disadvantage as well, the DoD is separate that into 5 steps. So if you happen to be achieving a level 4 or level 5, you can work with any company you want to, but the data you have that needs to be protected at level 4 or level 5 can only be shared with other companies that can protect it at that same level. So probably the DoD has given you level 4 or level 5 CUI data. You have to protect it at level 4 or 5. If you want to now give that to a sub, that sub would now have to be at that same level for you to share the data. Otherwise, you've got to somehow, downgrade the data to let them do what they do without giving them the level 4 or the level 5 data.
Right, and then there's downstream liability to that too as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
No, perfect. Good question there. So we've got a couple years. We're going to come out with this. The CMMC's program is going to be globally, worldwide. What else do we need to know as of today about the CMMC program?
Start looking at it now. If you think you've got a whole bunch of time, and you could get caught being wrong. So my recommendation is always start looking at it. If you do have a DoD contract, you already have some kind of cybersecurity clause in that contract. Be in compliance with whatever that clause is, whether it's just the basic DFARS, which will equate to a CMMC level 1, or whether it's the NIST 171 compliance regime, which would equate closely to a CMMC level 3. Start doing it now, right? What we're looking for at the end of the day is to change the culture of how people view cybersecurity, right? Most people that start companies are not experts in human resources, right? They are not experts in local, state, federal, provincial labor laws. So what do? They hire an HR expert. They open up an HR shop, right? That HR shop, that HR expert it's not a profit center, right? It's just a cost center. But that helps them navigate all those laws that they don't understand because the person starting the company has no clue what the labor laws are. Cybersecurity needs to be very, very similar to that. It's part of doing business. It makes your company better than the next company. All that kind of stuff is really good stuff. We're just trying to move that needle so people understand that this is important. So I would say start now. If you've got no cybersecurity, by all means, give me a call and I'll try to give you 2 or 3 things you can walk into and start doing immediately to help yourself out. If you've got clauses, be in compliance with those clauses. You have signed and attested that you are in compliance with those by taking the contract and taking the government's money. And then be ready to go. As the CMMC evolves, you've got 1 or 2 years. 1 or 2 years to get ready for one makes this very easy to do. Waiting until the last minute makes this very, very difficult.
Now, is it doable for 1 or 2 years? Because I mean, all of us have talked about and been part of some ISO larger, compliance. Some of them take a lot of time, change management, timing, resources, budget, you name it. How long are we looking at here? Like at realistic terms?
So again, I'll sort of have it in 2 different answers. One answer is if you are compliant with the cybersecurity clauses in your contract now, that is a very easy move, right? To go from NIST 171, adding 20 new controls, and then having some documentation that talks about the policies and the plans for how you're going to implement those controls. That's a couple months. At the probably the long end. If you have not been doing that and you want to go from 0 to hero and be all of a sudden that's going to take quite some time. That's going to be a multi-year process probably to do that, because the maturity level they're going to be looking for at the assessment, you have to demonstrate maturity. And if you just put it together yesterday, you won't be able to demonstrate that maturity.
Okay. Now we're hearing a lot in the marketplace about the CMMC COE. Yep. How does that play into the whole CMMC program?
So the COE is a little bit different entity. There's a guy that runs that named John Weiler. He actually has a company called the ITAC. Don't ask me what the acronym stands for because I don't remember. But he was on the board initially. He was one of the founding members with me that started this over 1.5 years ago with the DoD. And then for a lot of different reasons, mainly a very big personal impact to his life, he decided to leave the board. And so he left the board and he started the COE under the ITAC. And so it's sort of the same company, but sort of different. Again, you'd have to talk to John to figure out what the exact differences is. But I think they're going to be primarily focused on training and information sharing and stuff like that. So they're not going to be involved in necessarily assessments. I do not believe they're going to be designated as a C3 PAO. And so it's just sort of some of the other ecosystems that the AB cannot handle, is not designed to handle, was not designed to handle, I think is what the COE is going to be doing.
So from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be more market share, education, educating the market on what the CMMC program is and kind of that aspect, because the CPA 3AOs are actually consultants, right? And then you have your assessors coming from the AB. Is that correct?
Close. So yeah, so the AB, it won't have any assessors working for them, and we won't have any C3POs working for us. They'll be independent. So the C3POs will actually hire assessors. The assessors will do the assessing for the CMMC assessment. The AB is really just sort of a quality check to make sure everything went right, and then we funnel that data up to DoD so they can then use it to make contracting decisions. But yeah, I think you're right on the COE. I think their primary area is going to be focused on information sharing and training. So, let's say the first Canadian company, gets their CMMC assessment, they may have some lessons learned, right? They want to share. We really don't have a mechanism to do that necessarily at the AB level. So that would be something the COE might be able to take on is sort of that lessons learned, sharing of information so everybody gets better at the same time and we don't all make the same mistakes over and over again.
Now, this is someone that works for MSSP. Wouldn't that training come from your consultant? Like if you're a consultant, you're a CP3O, you're an RPO, you've gone through the training you're doing on that. XYZ company comes to us and says, "Hey, we need to get CMMC certified." Isn't our company doing that?
So yeah, we've got the RP program, the RPO program to train consultants. Again, it is not sort of what I just showed you, but it's awful close to what I just showed you, except it takes a day to go through it in much more detail. But it understands the ecosystem, it understands the model, how it's going to be used, how the the parts move together and work together to actually get the whole thing working. Is what we've provided training to the consultants. You don't have to do that, right? There's no requirement for you if you want to do consulting to go through the RP or the RPO program. You can continue to do whatever you want. But we thought it was important that maybe some of these companies had some training to do that. So, if you want to do consulting, you can certainly do that. If you'd like to get the training, you can certainly go to the website and get the training. But there's no requirement to do that. So you as a company, you can pick, again, whoever you want to. If you think it's better for you to have somebody that's gone through the training, then hire an RP and RPO. If you don't care, then again, hire whoever you've been working through for the past 10 years. That's fine if you've got a relationship and you trust them. But in terms of training, if you want to be trained by your consultant, by all means do that. But there are certainly other avenues for individuals to get trained other than just through their consultant.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I think that's all the question I have. Guys, if you are in the YouTube, Twitch, you guys are watching this, let me know if you have any questions. I just found out that, just give me a second here. ITAC stands for Information Technology Acquisition Advisory Council. So if anyone's looking that up and want to know, it's ITAAC. I'll just put this on the screen here so you guys can see it. That's actually what it stands for. So perfect, Chris. Yeah, thank you so much. It was great that you came in and gave us the value of what the CMMC program is, start to finish, and then what we need to look for going into the future if we have or we're part of the supply chain for the DoD.
Sure. And like I said, my last slide there had my contact information. If anybody's got questions, by all means, reach out. I'll do the best I can to answer.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Yep. Have a great evening.
Okay, guys, I'm going to bring on Jason and Hamad. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Can you hear me all right?
Doing good.
Hear you guys perfectly. You guys all ready to go?
Absolutely.
I think so. Hopefully the sharing's going to work good and we'll be ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. Give me a second here. I'm going to pull up your guys' presentation. There you go. And then you guys are ready to go.
Awesome. Go ahead. Hamad, why don't you kick us off, buddy?
All right. Yes, absolutely. Can you put it in presentation mode? Or
I can.
all right, cool. All right, guys. So thanks for joining. So my name is Hamad. I'm one of the principal architect at Aviatrix, and I'm joined by Jason.
Yeah. I guess good evening for most folks. Jason Langoni of the federal team here at Aviatrix. Live right outside of Washington, D.C., been in the federal space for 2-3 decades now. So long time.
Great. So as I said, my name is Hamad. I'm based out of New Jersey, and before Aviatrix, I was at VMware, Microsoft, and a bunch of other places. And I would say the Aviatrix is probably the best place that I've spent my life career with, and the reason being not just the technology that Aviatrix brings, but the impact that it's having in our everyday lives and how enterprises are doing things is just incredible. So let's talk a little bit. I'll give you a space of what Aviatrix is about and the space that we play in, and then we'll go talk about a little on the value, the business impact and that enterprises are and Fed space and everybody's seeing with Aviatrix, and then we'll do some deep technical conversations as well pertaining to security. So Aviatrix in a nutshell is the you can say Cisco of public cloud, essentially. So what we are doing is we are the core networking infrastructure of public cloud. So when it comes to building networking and security in public cloud, when you're putting your workload, your priced workload, your data, your sensitive information in the public cloud, how do you make it secure? So public cloud gives you, the basics of compute, storage, networking, great application stuff, but when it comes to security and networking and security infrastructure level, it is very primitive. And that's where Aviatrix comes in, and we make it enterprise. We make it at the level that you had on-prem, and actually better than that in a lot of ways. So we add a lot of value to Aviatrix. Is a platform that is completely software driven, built in the cloud for the cloud. So it gives advanced traffic engineering for networking, and it gives control to security teams. And for operations, it brings eyes and ears, because that is one of the most complicated and unprecedented kind of the problem that we run into cloud, is that you go in the cloud with all this promise that cloud's going to give me this, that, and that. But what, from the infrastructure piece perspective, cloud gives you is bunch of Lego pieces. It's like going to IKEA and buying something that looks beautiful, but when you go and say, I want this thing, they say go aisle 5, bin 10, and aisle 20, and bill 6, and collect all these pieces, go home and kind of piece it together, right? That's essentially from a networking perspective that you have to do in public cloud. And Aviatrix comes in and says, well, enterprise don't need that. Enterprise needs somebody to come and build it, and build it right, build it with security, with controls, with operational visibility. So all of these things are where Aviatrix comes in. And beside just the product, because product is definitely great, and we're going to talk about it. One of the things that we see in the marketplace and journal skill set of people around is that we have people with decades of experience in networking security on-prem, but in public cloud things are very different. They need guidance. And where do you get that guidance? That's where Aviatrix comes in, because we at Aviatrix for years have been talking and doing public cloud networking and security. That's all that we do. So the depth of experience and expertise that Aviatrix brings in, it's very, very different. You won't find it anywhere. Even at the CSP level, you won't find it, because the CSP only knows and preaches about their own infrastructure, but Aviatrix enables it for enterprises, for organizations, for Department of Defense, and everybody, to make it multi-cloud. So, Aviatrix has been around for a while, for about 7 years now, and we have more than 500 customers that are already deployed and using Aviatrix. So, Jason, if you go to the next slide, and we can kind of quickly show the different customers we have. It's across the globe, and it's across verticals. It's not limited to a specific segment of the industry. It's literally anybody who's in public cloud, where you're running any workload that is near and dear to you. Aviatrix is not nice to have. It's a must have. It's a real necessity, because when you go in cloud, you run into issues such as you don't have any encryption, there's no segmentation, anything can talk to anything. Bringing all of this control and visibilities is really hard challenge, and a lot of enterprises are realizing it. And we have today 500 customers, and we're just getting started. The ramp is very fast.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and jump in. So as I mentioned, I'm part of the federal government team here in the U.S., right outside of D.C., and kind of piggybacking off the previous conversation on CMMC and what's the government space doing, what's Department of Defense doing. I've been at Aviatrix. I guess this is my 7th month now, and I kind of picked out from most of the briefings I've been a part of recurring themes, and for the most part, these are themes that we're hearing in pretty much every briefing. The first one is that multi-cloud is the current reality. A lot of, at least on the US side, a lot of government agencies, jumped into cloud 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, primarily with AWS. For some folks, it was Azure, and that's where they built their core competencies. That's where they got certified. That's where they spent a lot of time on learning public cloud, particularly for that flavor. Over the last couple of years, most agencies, I think, have looked at, at least adding a second cloud, if not adding, a third and a fourth cloud. And it's primarily to do something specific. One of the things that I think I've seen as a trend, at least on the government side, is, again, most agencies have a primary cloud where they're running most of their compute. Maybe they're storing a fair amount of their data. But for some of these special services, whether it's things like Active Directory, whether it's where they want to run their database infrastructure, whether it's where they want to test new capabilities that maybe leverage machine learning, those end up being spun up oftentimes and not the primary cloud. So now, I've been getting smart for the last 5 years on something like AWS. My boss, my chain of command is saying, hey, man, we're going to do auto ML and GCP. Better figure this stuff out pretty quick because we want to, prototype a new capability. So that's, I think, been the first trend. And, sometimes you see these articles on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever where they're like, oh, you need freedom of choice in the cloud because, what if cost of compute gets a little cheaper in Azure versus AWS or vice versa? Honestly, I've never seen anyone talk about this in the real world, maybe at a high level, maybe in some marketing stuff. But the reality is, at least from what I've seen, folks look at other clouds because there's a capability that they want in that cloud. And that's what's driving them to spin up, some new service in a cloud that might be new to them. Another thing that's really important, especially on the GovCloud side, is sovereignty. Where does the data live, and what country does the data live? Who's running, the services? And if I adopt a vendor that maybe I procure through a marketplace, again, AWS marketplace, Azure, GCP, whatever it might be, is this a software stack that I own, that my agency owns, or me as an integrator owns, or is this something that's managed for me? And I will say, again, in my time here, and even at the previous company I was at, managed services for most government organizations are not a direction they're looking for. They're looking for agency-owned assets, especially when there's cyber breaches, there's things to make the front page of the Washington Post. They want total control. They don't want to have to pick up the phone and call someone and say, hey, we think we've got an incident going on in this region or in this cloud. Please help us. For them, they want full access to the underlying infrastructure, even if they're in the public cloud. And then the last piece is overall visibility, right? Like when things were on-prem and only on-prem 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And as Hamad mentioned, for the most part, everyone's standardized on a Cisco-based architecture. You could log into the routers and the switches. You had full control over everything. Just the nature of the public cloud, a lot of that is abstracted for you, especially if you're using native constructs. You might be in multiple regions, multiple clouds, and trying to troubleshoot and analyze, packet data across, that kind of a broad spectrum gets difficult. And imagine, kind of the stress if, I'm a NetSec engineer, or I'm working in a NOC or whatever it might be. And again, chain of command calls and says, hey, we think something's going on. Do a root cause analysis. Let's run some forensics. And you really don't have that ability. That's something I think that'll age you pretty fast. So these are the things I see, from the U.S. government perspective. These are the problems we're looking to address. And one thing I'll just mention in case there's any government folks connected in, we are available in GovCloud and all the GovCloud regions, as well as the intelligence community marketplace for those that serve that mission. So I'm gonna go ahead and advance it, Hamad. Go ahead, you let her rip.
Yeah. So one of the things that we say, right, as Jason pointed out, right, so all of these challenges and being multi-cloud being a reality. So multi-cloud is not something that we are seeing like once in a while. Like in a majority of our customers have some multi-cloud, right? It may not be 100% equally load balanced multi-cloud. That's not really where things are. That's definitely in the direction where people are moving. But the point is that people have a definite need of multi-cloud, and what that results in that if I have just one cloud, how do I solve problems in there? Okay, let's say it was my first cloud. I went in, I spent a lot of money, I got people, I threw a lot of resources at figuring out how to do things in single cloud. Okay, great, done. Now, as Jason's saying, another cloud comes in, right? A need comes in for enterprises, merger acquisition comes in, a new client comes in. We had a customer very recently who had a retail business, and they became the customer of our customer, and they said, well, there's no way I'd let you host me in AWS. You got to meet me in a different cloud. I'm never in AWS because they're a competitor of AWS at a retail side. So this customer of ours needed to support their customer in a different cloud. And if they didn't have Aviatrix, they won't be able to, or it would be very challenging for them. And the way we make it easy is via an architecture approach. So what that means is Aviatrix provides an architecture that solves the networking and security problems in your single cloud first, right? So this first region of your first cloud. Then as you grow from a single region to multi-region, the exact same architecture allows you to grow there. And when you have to go from a single cloud provider to a multi-cloud reality, the exact same architecture works. So you and I, the networking and security and infrastructure people and the business leaders, we are always ready to support any cloud, any region, anytime, right? So you're essentially turning around to your apps team and business saying, well, go consume wherever you want because my infrastructure is ready. It's no longer like 1990s or 2000 that you need 6 months for a VM to get spun up. It's the VMs are being spinning up in seconds, and the network that has to support that needs to spin up at the same speed. And Aviatrix architecture allows you to do that. So that's the architecture approach, that we have the architecture to do that. But what makes up that architecture in a high level? What are the challenges that we solve? So I'm going to go in a little bit more technical here, and then I'll try to show you some things to kind of connect the dots. So Jason, if you can go to the next slide. So essentially, as Jason said, we are supported in all the 4 major public clouds, which is AWS, Azure, GCP, and OCI. And if you want to call the Gov Cloud separately, then you have the AWS Gov Cloud and Azure Government supported as well. So what happens if you look at this diagram and you look at the point number 1, right, which is you see a couple of VPCs and you see a hub and spoke architecture, which in the cloud is referred as a transit architecture. So if you notice, this transit architecture is repeated in every cloud, in multiple regions of every cloud. So that's where the architecture brings a repeatable pod-like design, where you can take the exact same architecture and stamp it out, right? So think about this. Once you go to your governance team, compliance team, security, audit, whoever, you get one architecture approved. That's it. You're done. Now you can go in any region of any cloud with that same architecture. All the capabilities of connectivity and security are applicable irrespective of the cloud. So that's point number 1, the repeatable architecture. The second thing is, in public cloud, you're not just worried about my routing and how my packet is moving. You have to worry about other things, for example, is how the roles and responsibilities are going to be, right? So the networking team needs the right roles and responsibilities to be able to spin up infrastructure. So in larger organization, what that means is you have hundreds or sometimes thousands of accounts and subscriptions, because every team, every business unit, every application team may have an account of its own to do what they want. Now, when you need to build infrastructure, the infrastructure is not dedicated to a single account. It's for everybody. So how do you build networking across this multi-account, multi-subscription, multi-cloud world? So that's where, again, Aviatrix comes in, and we are fully multi-cloud ready, multi-account ready, so you can onboard hundreds or thousands of your accounts and be able to build across them. But at the same time that you can build across them doesn't mean anybody can talk to anybody, right? That's not the secure enterprise way. So the way we do it is by segmentation. So we provide, and I'm going to talk a little bit more later, what we call multi-cloud network segmentation. So if you follow the colors in the picture, the dots, they are representing the different segments. So I can define a segment as prod, dev, test, blue, green, yellow, red, purple, whatever, however you want to define it. And then we would air gap that environment from the other environment. So now the blue and green, it doesn't matter whether they are in same region or different region, they are not able to talk to each other. And similarly, if a blue is in AWS US1 and another blue is in AWS US2 and another blue is in Azure, it doesn't matter which cloud they are, all the blues are able to talk to each other. So your segment definition can span regions, can span cloud. That's just unbelievable control when it comes to security that Aviatrix platform brings. And that definition of segment is not localized to the cloud. It actually extends to on-premise. So you can designate a site, a branch, a location as blue, red, green, or whatever. And then you can say, hey, branch X can only talk to VPC Y and Z. Let's say if you have a bunch of branches that need access to some customer-facing application, you can just localize and limit that segment and expose only those specific applications. And then what you can do is you can insert firewalls to inspect traffic, and you can select what kind of traffic gets inspected. Everything that Aviatrix builds is fully encrypted, and I'm going to talk about the challenge of encryption in a few minutes. But as you can imagine, it's public cloud, so all the data at transit in motion must be encrypted, and that's another thing that Aviatrix brings. So I'm not trying to go through the 10 different things here. I'm just kind of touching high level on different things to give you an idea that the platform is comprehensive, and it cuts across networking, security, segmentation, basically the zero trust model in public cloud that we bring. And one last thing I would add on this slide is that irrespective of what I can build, right? Okay, great product. You can build whatever you want. You can segment this and that. But if it does not have eyes and ears, if my operations team, if my networking security team, my auditor cannot come and see what's happening, can validate what's happening, can troubleshoot problems quickly, it's all for no use. So my teams should not have to call AWS and Azure for every little problem. My teams should be able to solve it themselves. Now, when I say my team, doesn't mean that I need to go hire a brand new army of people. How do I leverage my existing team? I have people who I trust, who are trained, who know my application, who know my processes. How do I make their existing skill set relevant in public cloud? How do I make my networking and operations team be as efficient or more efficient in public cloud than they were on-prem? So these are the challenges that Aviatrix solves. Jason, anything to add to that?
No, not at all. I think great job.
Okay, cool. So before we go and tackle a couple of more security focused challenges or the problems that Aviatrix solves, let me show you a quick demo of one part of our platform, which is called Copilot, which is mainly a visibility arm of the platform. So let's see if I can start sharing. Jason,
let me
if you
know
can
if I
stop
need
sharing,
to
I'll try.
Sure thing.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is the basic control plane where you can you manage all of your clouds. So this is a single pane of glass management for your multiple clouds and multiple region, right? Everything. So as you can see in my environment here, I see AWS Gov Cloud, Azure, ARM Gov, which is Azure Gov, Google, OCI. So these are all the clouds that we support. And then I have some more details in here which I'll go. But what I want to demonstrate that the platform is very simple. It's something that is easy to use for the networking people. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to build networking and infrastructure in the cloud. So if you look and follow here, so the diagram that Jason showed, the transit architecture, right, the hub and spoke, it's so simple to build. Everything is workflow based. So you'd see 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing, right? And everything has a detailed documentation linked off of it. So if you click on that, it would take you, okay, what you're deploying, what are the different things, what do they mean, and what are the designs, what are the patterns, what is the throughput, and everything is fully documented in here. Now, if you look at the in here, the simple workflow allows me to build it in any cloud that I have onboarded, right? So if, for example, I go in Azure, I have, then choice of which account or subscription I want to onboard this in. And I can pick a region, I can pick a size, I can deploy, anything, any region and any subscription here. Then the second point here is that I can enable HA. All the infrastructure people, how much time do we spend in thinking, researching, building HA, right? It's a major part of our design. Aviatrix makes it so simple. You come in, you say enable HA on the transit, and we would deploy the HA gateway, we would configure it, we would manage it, we would health check it. Everything is done by the Aviatrix control plane. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the Aviatrix platform is not a managed service. So it's not something that Aviatrix as a company would have access to. It's something that the enterprise owns or the organization owns. So Aviatrix has no access to your data. Aviatrix has no access to your control plane or data plane. It's completely locked and only accessible to you as a customer, right? So it's just exactly like the way you would typically build infrastructure. So anyways, there's all of these things are in here that allows you to build, and you can see the multi-cloud transit, and then you can deploy firewalls, and you can not just deploy firewalls, but you can also deploy multiple types of firewalls. As an example, right in here, you can see that we allow you, once it populates, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Fortinet are some of the most popular, but you can deploy F5s and Cisco Firepower and Barracuda, whatever you want in here. And we would not only just deploy the firewall, we would deploy it, we would configure the networking for it, and we'll bring it up so that then you can go and configure policies. So you manage the firewall the way you manage normally, and your teams know, but the problematic areas, the tough part of deploying the firewalls, managing the routing of the firewalls, the scale of the firewall, the high availability of the firewall, all of these things are taken care of by Aviatrix. You don't have to worry about that. You just worry about configuring your firewall, policies, and whatever you want. So this is the control configuration aspect. So I wanted to jump to more visibility aspect, which is the Copilot platform. So I had a couple of tabs open just to quickly hop around. So what you would see in here is that it has a dashboard which allows you to see different things in your environment across different data centers. For example, you have AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI. It sees everything in here, gives you a high level overview. Okay, this is your a morning view of it. Then you go in topology. So this is a dynamically building topology. This topology is being built all the time dynamically. And we don't just show you the topology, but we also show you the different latencies between the regions, between the spokes. And then you can search across all of these things. So what this is doing is it's pulling inventory from AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI. Let's say somebody's complaining that I have something called like a prod or dev or something that's complaining. It would immediately highlight on your entire chart where thing is, right? And then these gateways are not just for show. You can actually run diagnostics from it. You can do pings and trace route, and you can do test connectivity, so telnet to port. You can look at the currently active sessions that are going through this. So all of these things are, very, very quickly doable here, which if you are in public cloud natively, you have no visibility into what's going on, right? It becomes very, very challenging. And we continuously do latency monitoring, and this is not just within region, it's multi-region, multi-cloud. You can see what the latencies are, where the spikes are. So if somebody's complaining, let's say between AWS and Azure, there was a problem at 744 or whatever, you can kind of come in and see, oh yeah, in the past hour, there was a huge latency where latency went from like 69 millisecond to 425 millisecond. So you can very quickly correlate your problems to what was happening in the environment. Then you can come in and look at Flow IQ. The Flow IQ basically shows you a high level overview of what's going on in the environment. This is a big challenge in public cloud. There's no visibility. It's like you hand over the packet from source and you wish and pray that the packet arrives at the other end. And if it doesn't, then you have no idea for the most part what's happening. And what we do is we put eyes and ears on every packet that we see. So you are able to, visualize, filter. You can add about like 80 different kinds of, fields for filtering on source, destination, port, and all these kind of things, flags and whatever, right? And you can do it on a timeline basis. And you can, look at the trends, for example, again, what happened at a certain time, what are the spike, what are the trends, and you can click on different things and it will automatically become searchable. So for example, if I come in here and I see, as an example, I have a lot of traffic going to China. Okay, who is talking to China, right? So on what ports? So I see 1433. So there's a database, some kind of database that is being exposed. Oh, which IP is it? So the source IP is 10.2 and the destination IP is 10.2.2.2. And I can kind of I actually, this not my environment, this is just some demo environment. I can see that there's like this traffic that is running port 1433, which is SQL with this machine. That's probably something that I need to investigate, that why there's something in China that's accessing this system, right? So you can go to flows and the filters carry over, and you can kind of see how things are, or you can clear the flows as well. And if you want to look at specific data, so raw data, so for example, you want to see the TCP flags, you want to see deep down technical information about what is happening. Let's say a typical thing for networking team is applications team would say it's a network. The problem is in the network. My app is working fine, or it was working fine, is the network. So how would the networking team come and say, yes, it is the network, or no, it is not the network, right? So this is a source of truth. You can filter based on source and destination IP in a matter of seconds. And then you can see, oh, what kind of packets are going, how much data is going, since when, who is it talking to? And based on it, you can say, well, I see the traffic going through to your application, so it's not the network. Or yeah, I don't see any traffic, and let me go and see at the network layer what's going on. So there's a lot of things in here. So there's, you can look at performance, you can look at the routes, you can filter your routes, entire routes, end to end. You can look at your sites coming in, your tunnels coming in. You can look at the BGP. If for any of the network engineers who's listening to this, this is very critical information. All the BGP map and configuration, ASN, all of these things are something that the network engineers are typically pretty interested in. And then you have this thing called App IQ, where you can define, for example, a source, and then you can define the destination. And as typically, somebody would say, hey, source A is not able to talk to destination B. So what is going on between them, right? So I need a complete report. Typically, what this means is you have to check 50, 60 different things and you have to kind of, tab open, tab open, tab open, and try to figure out and correlate different things. And what we do is, in a matter of seconds, as we saw, we show you a complete map of where's the source, where's the destination, how are they connected, what is the latency between them. Then how is the infrastructure doing, right? Infrastructure, memory, CPU, rates. Are you seeing any spikes? Are you seeing anything else going on? What is the flow data? So for example, between these two, source and destination, there hasn't been any data in the last hour. Then majority of the problems come in here where the firewall rules are set up incorrectly, the NACLs or the security groups or the route tables. So it doesn't just highlight or bring the NACL, it actually highlights which rule is the one that's allowing it. So what that means is, if I have, let's say, 50 rules, I don't have to figure out which rule was it matching. It automatically highlights the rule that it's matching, right? So it's like taking your car to a dealership and say, do a 200-point check and tell me how is it doing, right? So when you have a problem, we do automatic 200-point check and tell you, oh, the security group at this pod is failing because it doesn't have a rule for inbound to allow this traffic, right? So I know exactly what do I need to touch. So, and then you can export this as a PDF and you can share within your teams or between your teams and stuff. So again, it makes it so much more easy for the operations team and the network team and the security team to communicate with each other, talk to applications team and be able to solve problems very, very quickly. And then there's a lot of stuff around security. So for example, what are your sites are doing? What are your applications talking to? Which location are they going? Which URLs are they hitting? And there's a lot of things in here. So I don't want to go into too much detail. We can spend a couple of hours just talking in detail about each of these, but I thought to give you a quick overview of what this is. And at the end of the day, if any of you who've been, either in the public cloud, then you already know that it doesn't have any of these details. But any of you who are planning to go to public cloud know that this is where we have seen people and enterprises really struggling. I was at a customer the other day, and two of their most senior engineers were in the room with me, and one of the guys had double CCIE. They had a report of something that they had to allow traffic between point A and point B. And they had left the room at around 11:30 saying, well, we'll be back in half an hour, right? And these guys didn't come back for the whole day. And next day they came in and said, well, we were on this call for until 8 p.m. and we had to bring 4 other people. What? Just 2 points needed to communicate. And it's so hard without the right tools to do that. With Aviatrix platform, it just does it and makes it so simple for you to do that. Jason, any questions? Anything you wanted to add?
I mean, the one thing I'll say is, the demo, and I know we kind of dove in deep here. For a lot of the DoD and cyber agencies and programs we brief, we start here. We tease them a little bit with this capability, and then we kind of dive into the story. But this perks people up pretty quick. Anyone who's ever had to troubleshoot anything and in any public cloud knows it can be it can be pretty dodgy.
Well, I mean, one of the things I was kind of listening to your presentation, really kind of thinking about, if I was going to be in cybersecurity and some of the things that you guys are doing right now, how would it work for me as a cybersecurity professional? Because I mean, you guys are doing, pane of glass. I heard you talking about like the data. You guys are be able to track that. But what about like data encryption? Are you guys looking at high levels of encryption and helping to support that as well? Like, I know right now we're looking at data is the new oil, right, of cybersecurity. In organizations, they're trying to protect as much as possible. And you guys are saying like you can kind of track it from any cloud instant solution and watch it, from the instance of when it leaves the cloud to when it delivers to the actual end user, whatever that may be. But what about the level of encryption? What about level of security? Those are some things that, I'd love to hear you guys talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll touch on that. So first thing I would say is that it's interesting, Brandon, you're saying the level of security. Unfortunately, there is no encryption for data in transit in public cloud.
Okay.
It's amazing. People don't realize. So for example, the means of connecting, if let's say you have a, on-premise data center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're connecting to AWS or Azure, or you pick any cloud, all of them are the same in that respect. You get a connection from on-prem to cloud, let's say a 10 gig link or whatever. It goes through Rogers or AT&T or whoever. That whole pipe from your on-prem location to cloud is completely not encrypted. And a lot
Okay.
of people don't realize that. So what happens is when they find that, and typically they find out later not until like a compliance or security guy comes in and auditor catches that, they say, and it was something that happened to a customer of ours, is that, hey, you cannot do this. You're doing database backup to public cloud, but this is an encrypted channel. And they said, okay, I'm going to go and encrypt it. And when they went to encrypt it, by default, the maximum that you can get is 1 gig.
Okay.
That's all. Even if you have a 10 gig pipe, you cannot get more than 1 gig. So what do you do then? If I have terabytes of data that needs to be backed up, I can't do that on a 1 gig pipe. It's going to take months, right?
Right.
So Aviatrix has a patented solution where we can do 10 gig encrypted on each circuit, and we can go up to 100 gig encrypted from on-prem to cloud, number one. And then when you talk about within the cloud, so when you are going from one VPC to another VPC or a VNet to another VNet, even within same cloud, forget about the complexity of multi-cloud, just single cloud, single region, that data is also not encrypted. Of course, most people have their disks encrypted,
Mm-hmm.
meaning yes, at rest data is encrypted. But what about when the data leaves the VPC and goes anywhere else? It's not encrypted. And Aviatrix, again, has a high performance encryption solution that can do up to 90 gig encrypted traffic from a throughput perspective, which is just amazing, incredible speed. Not just that, we make it easy to do. It's a single click for our customers. You don't have to worry about setting 50 IPsec tunnels and managing the keys. So we've set that up. We rotate the keys, it's fully encrypted, and it all the rekeying and everything keeps on happening in the background. From a customer perspective, you say point A needs to talk to point B, and Aviatrix control plane, go figure it out, and we do that.
Wow. I mean, that's a concern. I mean, all of us in cybersecurity kind of go, hold on a second here. So you're telling me right now, all because of the pandemic, every company, organization that either was on cloud from a hybrid solution to now completely on cloud potentially is not secure.
Yeah. And now what happens, I'll tell you, right? This is a frank conversation. So what happens is, as what enterprise say, and sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how can I explain this to you? The thing is that they say, well, we're doing encryption at application layer. Okay, easily said. My applications are using certificates and TLS, and it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how many applications do you think a typical organization runs? Hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so first question, how do you ensure all hundreds of your applications are running the right level of encryption all the time? Number one, it's even if you're doing it, to prove it to an auditor and compliance is extremely hard. Number two, in most reality, you are not doing it. Most of the applications are running TLS 1.0 or 1.1, or a lot of applications are not even doing encryption. Okay, then what's your solution? Oh, I'm going to ask the application team to encrypt it. Okay, what's the timeline on that? Who knows? Okay. For example, if the application is not homegrown, it's some vendor. Now you got to go and talk to the vendor and say, can I do encryption? Can you do encryption for me? And the vendor is going to have their timeline, and then it may impact your design, the way you have deployed it. Then you have to, do a lot of other things. So unfortunately, the customers, the people, a lot of them are in this phase right now where they're struggling through it, and the auditors and the compliance teams are catching up to that. And that's where a lot of customers of ours come in, and they are super happy because everything that we do is encrypted. So it's like, layered security, right? So application team, they have their own responsibility. Their responsibility is to secure application. But as an perspective infrastructure person, can I just sit back and relax saying, oh, application is doing encryption, I don't have to do anything? No, you got to do your thing, I got to do mine. So application layer, please go encrypt it, please go make sure it's secure, please go whatever. But at an infrastructure layer, I'm going to make sure that the data plane is encrypted, so that even if an application is compromised, nobody can do a man in the middle attack, or nobody can go in and kind of try to take that over.
Think about who would be in the hot seat, right? If there was an event and CIO, who someone way up the food chain is doing what happened and who's at fault, or how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? I think ultimately that buck lies with network team, security team, infrastructure team. Less so, at least from my experience, the application. Like, oh yeah, the application guys, maybe they could have encrypted it better, maybe they could have done something better in the design. But the ones getting their knuckles slapped are typically, at least from my experience, it's always us as the infrastructure folks.
So then why is this not more widely known? Because I mean, you guys know this. I mean, there's pen testing teams now going wild right now because, as of February, March 2020, a lot of companies overnight had to go into the cloud, right? They, oh my God, either business continuity, we had to shut down the business. We had to jump into the cloud, move all our data, give access to our remote users or workers. And also then, they finally settled and they said, okay, well, now we got to test it. Why isn't this more widely known that these instances of setup and configuration, that this is actually a gap? There's a demarcation now between the data in motion. Now is like in plain text, people can actually now, sit there and just, collect the data. They can just watch, right? So why is this, like, asking you guys as the professionals, why is this not widely more known?
So I can give you my 2 cents on that, and Jason, please add. So one of the things is people, unfortunately, so if you look at a lot of customers that we talk to, right, who's leading the charge to go into public cloud is not mostly the infrastructure people. It's not the security guys. It's the application teams, the dev teams, and DevOps, and people who own the application, and they were waiting on the infrastructure to spin up in on-prem world, but it was taking too long, and they said, let's go in public cloud. It's going to be more agile and this and that, right? They're going into the cloud. Now the problem with that is that a lot of the application team people, they've never built infrastructure security the way on-prem teams have done, right? So this is something that a guy told me, and one of the network infrastructure guy I was talking to, he's like, sometimes I'm amazed, right, that the DevOps people think that why did I had to spin up multiple firewalls from multiple vendors on my on-prem world to secure, and they think that a security group in AWS is good enough security, right? So that's one thing. So it's who are the people who are leading it in the organizations who are doing it right, where the actual networking infrastructure security people are leading it. They are seeing these problems. They're trying to solve it. They're coming to Aviatrix, or however they are trying to do it. They see the problem, they're trying to solve it. So that's one piece of it.
So let me ask you that before you move on.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to go back into this.
Yeah,
Why is this not more widely known? Right,
why
that's what that. So
yeah.
I think
we're in security right now. Like SolarWinds. Everyone and their brother heard about that. Like if you were in security, you heard about that, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we
Mom
hearing
heard
that?
about that, I think.
I think everyone. I think people like outside of IT's going, yeah, there's a solar wind thing. You know, that thing that
Right, right.
in the actual farm. I think that got hacked. No, it was actually gonna, like everyone's kind of doing that, right? Someone's relating because they saw it in the news, right? So, but my
Yep.
question to you guys, because you guys are like, this is what you live and breathe. Why isn't it like almost that kind of equivalent? Because so many people moved over to the cloud. Why isn't like, oh my God, like, hold on, red flag, this is a major security flaw.
Yeah, I would say from the government perspective, I think they all know, assume, believe the doctrine that everything must be encrypted. So for the folks I'm talking to, it's not like, oh, why is this stuff plain text? They're using the encryption available to them through the CSPs. So that goes to what Hamad was talking about. It's like, all right, you're trying to shove everything through a 1 to 2 gigabit per second straw, and think of that small straw, and then couple that to the scale of government. Like those two things don't go together, right? So maybe you got a bunch of little straws, you're trying to manage hundreds of little tunnels, which is a train wreck. Or you've got your one tunnel and you're trying to shove so much data, you're doing queries through it, and we just gotta wait. So I see on the government side, people recognize it, and just they're using the solution that that they assume is the only thing that exists, or they're very comfortable with AWS and what it's got, and Azure and what it's got, and so they look there first. That's part of Hamad and I's job, is to go educate folks. But I think on the government side, they know they got to be encrypted. They're just hamstrung by what's available or what they think is available. If that makes sense.
Now isn't VPN this type of solution from end to end, like we're talking about right now? Because I know you're saying end to end right now, currently, without some of other application or some sort of tunneling. It's kind of plain text, but right now they capitalize on VPN from end user to cloud to secure that communication from in motion, at least.
Yeah, so that's true, but the limitation comes to throughput, right? So a VPN tunnel can only give you 1 gig, right?
Right.
So what that means is if you as a user are connecting from home or something like that, then that's more than enough bandwidth. But you have a branch, you have a site, you have a office, you have a data center connecting in, 1 gig is nothing, right? You chew
Oh,
that
for
out in
sure.
a second, right? And another, I think, thing that's happening is there are a couple of things. One is that when we look at people who are moving to public cloud, what we've seen is for the first, if you break the past 6 years into 2 chunks, the first 4 years, and then the 2 years, the last 2 years, like 19, 20, and coming 21, right? So the first 4 years, 2013, 14 to 6 to 17, 18. People were talking about public cloud. Enterprise were talking about public cloud. You had these DevOps teams and people moving into the public cloud. There you have the born in the cloud kind of enterprises who are going in public cloud. But the real enterprise was not putting the critical infrastructure in the cloud, the revenue generating critical mass infrastructure. That mass motion started happening like about 2 years ago. This is when the actual enterprise IT, people who have the $2 trillion budget to spend on IT are going into public cloud, right? So now in 2 years, what we are seeing is enterprise are getting more serious. These encryption, and encryption is just one piece of it. Then how do I do IPS IDS, inspect the packet payload of the traffic, right? How do I do segmentation, right? All of these things are things that are not in the cloud. So unfortunately, I was on a call this morning. The guy said it right. He said that when I go in cloud, networking is 20 years behind. It's so basic. So to be honest, I don't really have one answer to say like this is why we are not hearing about it. But if you go in enterprise, people are scared about it. They are really worried about it. One of the ways people are getting around, which is in my opinion unfortunate, like as a tech person, is that they're saying that, well, stuff in the public cloud inside is trusted. So when traffic is going between VPC to VPC, VNet to VNet, region to region, it's trusted. I don't really need to encrypt it. So whatever application gives me is okay because I'm trusting it.
Mhm.
So a little bit of tweaking of how people are defining the trust boundaries is making it easier for them to get away from encryption requirement, but where it leaves that, so it goes from cloud to on-prem, or it goes from cloud to a remote partner or something, you have to encrypt, right? But then when they're doing it, the only thing they have is IPsec VPN, where you get limited to a gig.
Mhm.
So that's where we see people hurting, and Aviatrix is the only vendor out there who has this capability, because this is a patented capability that we have. And the only reason why a lot of people may not be using it is because they just don't know Aviatrix exists. To be honest, that's what it is. So once we talk to customers and we talk about the things we do, which we haven't talked about the whole thing, but encryption, segmentation, firewall insertion, high performance throughput, right?
Mhm.
Connecting secure users, connecting your branches securely, connecting multi-cloud, multi-region securely, right? All of these things are just like, people are like, oh crap, I didn't even know you guys exist, because I've been suffering with these problems and pains for last, however long I've been in cloud.
Okay. Okay. No, and I mean, it's a good point, right? Because I mean, one thing we gotta look at as security experts is security, defense in depth, right? A layers approach, not just, you kind of a bandage approach. You kind of do, okay, I VPN, and then we're good to go, and now we're secure, right? On top of that, I mean, something that I love you guys to address is, how do you complement their security policies, right? When they're coming into governance and things along that line, because you have a lot of technical controls. But what about and we talked about the CMMC. What about the actual administrative controls and the technical, those type of controls married to the technical controls? How do you guys support them that way?
Yeah, so I'll answer my viewpoint, and then Jason can probably add more from the CMMC perspective. So the way we do it is that we have a control plane. So again, going back to number one point, is that we don't own any of your data. We don't own any of your controls. We give you knobs that you can use to define your controls the way it fits you, right? Number one. Number two is that in the cloud, is the concept is the boundary, administrative boundary is called an account or a subscription, right,
Mm-hmm.
or a project, like different cloud provider call it differently. So what we do is we say that we extend our RBAC, the role based access control, to these account space. So what it means is, Brendan, let's say you are dev account,
Mm-hmm.
and Jason is prod account, or Hamad is QA, right? So Hamad can come and build whatever in QA account. I can build 1 VPC, 10 VPC, doesn't matter. But I cannot do anything which connects QA to dev or prod.
Mm-hmm.
By using these, IAM roles and policies and role-based access control, we limit the amount of configuration or exposure each account would have, right? But then you have another level which you can call like the network or enterprise, who can come in, and enterprise administrator can say, well, QA and dev can talk to each other, as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they can say, well, QA can talk to prod, but when QA talks to prod, it must be inspected by a firewall before it talks.
Mm-hmm.
So we give the control to administrators to define the boundaries, number
Mm-hmm.
one, and then define the connection policies on how these different entities and different boundaries can talk to each other, and give a very simple way of inserting security services, service chaining, appliances. Think about like the Palo Altos, the checkpoints, the Fortinet, and the Ciscos of the world, to say, hey, these two entities need to talk. Make sure, inspect the firewalls. Now, when it comes to firewalls, we are own the packet to be sent to the firewall.
Mhm.
Now, we don't want to be the firewall. We are not a firewall vendor, right? And customers already have established brands, licensing, people with skill set, procedures, policies, the whole 9 yard that goes in creating a security policy, right?
Mhm.
So what we want is we want customers to use the appliances that they know, love, understand, but take the complexity of getting the packet to the appliances out of their way. So once the packet arrives at the firewall via Aviatrix, then the customer can configure the firewall the way they want, right? We
Right.
don't limit it.
So I get that, and perfect. Those are still technical controls. What we want to look as this defense in depth, right? Because you've got a great, avenue for the technical controls, but now the administrative of policies, procedures, governance, things like that. Like, and again, we're talking about the CMMC, where it's more administrative documentation. Now maybe I'll ask this to Jason. How are you guys marrying that with your technical controls that you guys have right now to give that full solution? Because I can have a firewall, right? But if I don't have administrative controls of acceptable use policies and how it should be configured, and I haven't disaster recover and I haven't wrote that out, doesn't matter the firewall is great or not. If the power is shut off, right, and the firewall goes down, now what, right? Like, what's our disaster recover? I don't know. John does it. Well, John's not here anymore. It's Fred. Well,
Find a
Fred's
new job.
right? Fred, what about Fred? Fred doesn't do that. He's now over in SQL. Like, okay, I don't know who does it, right? Same thing. That's why I was asking you guys, because again, looking at defense in depth, it's not just the technical controls, it's a holistic view of everything, right? So I'll leave that to Jason. Jason,
Sure.
like, how do you guys kind of marry that right now?
Yeah, so I will say on the CMMC front, we are working directly with the group responsible for that, or actively contributing to it, and we are helping them overcome, of all things, encryption challenges in a multi-cloud environment. So
Okay.
they did some Google search, they found us, they're like, hey, this is the problem we have, and we've been working with them now for several months to help them overcome some of this stuff. And then it came out just in conversation, like, oh yeah, by the way, we're contributing authors to this, and advising on that. So as far as marrying the two, you're right, because the technical component is the technical component, so the human component, that's where typically things get broken. For us, it's kind of a mixture of two things. One is just joint active design sessions, which are typically folks like us are doing that on a base somewhere behind closed doors. Now you got to do the best you can virtually and obfuscate it. But the other thing that we've been doing a lot of on the government side are conducting like operational readiness, whether it's workshops, whether it's something in a longer format, where we say, okay, we've together have mocked up what the design will look like, right? And the scale might change, maybe even the regions will change. Again, that's the technical design. Now let's talk about what change control board looks like, engineering review board looks like, what happens when cyber incident response, like what is the form you have to fill out? Let's make sure we understand how you get all the little variables when you have to fill out that cyber incident, response form. So that's the stuff, some people find it fun, some people find it, like grueling work. But it's how you marry the two and have a functional security posture in the public cloud versus, that's great, you got a technical solution, that's great, you got these tools that do X, Y, and Z. But we've never married that to our processes. We've never married that to even our personnel and the capabilities we have. So that's the stuff that kind of goes, as you're ramping to a full-fledged implementation, the operational readiness is, to me, what makes it production grade, mission grade, however you look at it.
Right. And I think that's something that, that's why I wanted to address that, because a lot of these guys buy the newest, greatest technology, they put it in, but not having the administrative controls, they can't manage it, right? Ongoing, when you're looking at the life cycle, disaster recover, business continuity, all these different plans, they're like, yeah, we've got the newest, greatest firewall, CASB solution, whatever that may be.
Yep.
But how are you managing it? Well, Bob's doing it. Like, it's Fred, and this, like, they're all pointing fingers going one of this, and all of a sudden they go, oh, great. So that's why I wanted to ask you how you guys help support your clients do that, because I think that's a holistic viewpoint of not only kind of looking at the technical controls and how it works and how it's going to secure them, but, and we know this as talking this, but like the cloud solutions, a lot of clients don't know about the shared security model, Like they go AWS is going to secure me. No, they're not. You know, if it's platform as a service, they're going to actually secure the platform. So that means the hard drives, the environment, access points of actually the physical building, they're going to be redundant. So like if your drive fails, they're going to, you know, be able to roll that over. But someone gets into your platform and hacks it. Guess what? That's all you.
That's all you. Exactly. Right. Yeah, no, exactly. No, I think that's very well said, because that's the dilemma we see at the business level. Unfortunately, what we see is that the way a lot of business makes decision going to the cloud, assuming the cloud is give me compute, storage, networking, security, application, everything at enterprise grade and cheaper. I mean, that's the kind of like a lot of time we see that people assume this thing, which we know is not real, right? And especially if you look at the cloud providers, they're incentivized to focus more on application layer, because that's where they kind of get locked in from the customers, right? Their focus is not really networking and infrastructure, and that's where we focus. We come in and we help customers. And from the governance perspective, you know, a lot of customers really love what we do, because we make compliance much more easier. We make auditing much more easier, because, you know, as I was showing you the eyes and ears piece, right? Everything that everything has dashboard, everything is logged. You know, all the configuration that you do are not, nobody's going in and just making changes right, left, and center. Everything can be driven via a source control based system, where all your configuration, all their changes are logged, who did it, they're auto recoverable. They're anytime you say, well, this piece, something messed up, I want to recover it, I want to go back, right? And by definition, because we are multi-cloud, we help a lot of customers with disaster recovery. A lot of our customers come to Aviatrix because they have stuff running in region 1, they have some stuff running in region 2, they want to protect against region failures. If you follow the news, AWS US East 1 has been going down like almost monthly. There's an outage there, right? So how do you get your data to be, you know, or your enterprise to be, you know, disaster recovery ready?
Yeah, I was just gonna go ahead. I'm sorry, Brandon.
No, I mean, you guys got a good point. I mean, when people get set up and configured for a cloud, they're looking at ease of use. I mean, one of the things that we see, right, is the data consumption, right? A lot of people go, oh, I've gotten the cloud, and they're starting to store logs and things. And all of a sudden they start to see the costs go up and up and up. And they're going, holy crap, like this is costing so much. Like, hold on a second here. And they're doing like data and logs and events and whatever that may be. And now they're like, okay, what's really happening? Why is this costing so much money? Right. So like you said, like the first initial, like you said, is like, woohoo, this is great. And then it's, 90 days in, they're going, hold on, where's this big bill coming from?
Unfortunately,
I would say you got the cost piece of it. The other piece is, if you look at why these folks are going to the cloud in the first place, one of the big drivers is agility, right? Like decreased time to mission. So all the problems we've been talking about for the last half hour or so, if whatever you slap on to fix it drastically decreases your organization's agility, why'd you go to the cloud in the first place? Right. So that's the other big piece of it is, from a strategic level, you go talk to brass, you go talk to senior advisors and officials. They want the agility. They want to watch what's Google doing. Oh, maybe we want to try Auto ML for a new capability. What's Oracle doing? What's Amazon doing? Like, they like that innovation race across the CSPs. They like that agility. But if all of a sudden you got to lock it back down so it feels like on-prem in 1995, why do we go to the cloud in the first place, or public cloud in the first place?
But I think we always have that at a high level. That kind of debate is and you guys know this, and you guys watching this, is that CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? When you look at the triad, right? You look at, confidentiality and security, making sure the data and all that's, integral, that's not being manipulated. And then availability, you can do everything, you can change, you can modify, you can do a lot. So now you're having this balance, right? Well, we got security, so security locks everything down. But we want it available, so now you have to open back up again, right? So you're always having this, swing, right? It's like, hold on. Security guys come in and go, everything needs to be locked down, secure everything. John is the only one who has access, and he has this. And then if we have a failover for Fred has it, and that's it. No one else should have
That's
access
it.
to that. And then all of a sudden someone else comes and Stacy comes and goes, but I need access. I need to do this. Well, now we have to open up to Stacy and her department, right? So now security starts to go, right? So I think that's the balance and the challenge that I think all of us run into is trying to find that sweet spot, including innovation. Like you got IoT, you got all these different solutions that need to have access and want to do that. Well, then what happens? Your security starts to be, compromised slightly depending on these technologies, right? So I think you're right, and I think it's the ever evolving security solutions that we're working on as a team to keep providing and keep evolving.
Yeah, and if you look at the top, good, Jason.
No, I'm gonna say if you look at at a global perspective, like the new frontier, one of the new frontiers for warfare is cyber, right? So it's like, okay, like not everyone worries about it maybe the way some of us worry about it or have lived that life. But when you look at what's going on, who's being offensive, who's being defensive, like that's at a cyber level. So I do think more and more folks that maybe are even outside the government space are taking this much more seriously than they ever, ransomware, like all this stuff. These are new problems that we didn't really have 10 years ago.
Right, exactly. Now I'm going to jump James in here. And if anyone has any questions, I know we're just talking right now and kind of, spitfiring cybersecurity, but if you guys have any questions, just chime in right now. So James, what do you think? I mean, you've been sitting here listening. What do you think about, the discussion that we're talking about?
Well, I think when it comes down to cyber warfare, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that up front. It's going to grow now that supercomputers are out there, and you have supercomputers in British Columbia, I believe in Finland, and in China as well. They're at 2 qubits now. There's quantum computers up to, 200 qubits in some places. It's only a matter of time before cyber warfare actually comes to our front door. And when it does, the question is, are we ready? Because without quantum-proof technology, it simply is going to be like ripping through security, utilizing toilet paper as your protection. And I hate to say it, the deep side of that, but there are many organizations out there that believe that, and they watch it constantly. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and thank you for hitting these topics because these are critical to the world right now.
Well, I think one thing we have to be like, we're in cybersecurity, so we kind of look at the risks. I mean, that's where we live our lives, right? It's not, the house is burning. It's like, whatever, we're like, okay, the house is burning. This is what's going on. Where's the safe? Where's that? Where's the money? How's the children? What's going on? We're looking at everything, right? Well, I live in Toronto, and one of the things that, when I worked for the SkyDome as a physical security, they talked about the communications. Like, so if there was ever like a terrorist attack, anything along that line, where are certain, areas that if they got hit, it would take the city down. Well, the CN Tower is the biggest communication tower for Toronto and across the GTA. If that ever got hit, we would lose communications, right? Just like that alone. So you kind of look at these things where it's just one point of failure where you're like, oh my God, well, we look at security, look at cloud, right? One point of failure, if Amazon got hit and took out all their data centers and everything that's going on, how many companies would be affected right now through the pandemic?
Yeah.
Would we be able to be doing this, or like, well, the platform for this, where's that hosted? Like, think of all the things that would be down, right?
Exactly, right? So these are the crazy things that when you look at cyber warfare and things that we're hearing day in and day out on the back end, what's going on, these are things that we're trying to protect against through this communication and sharing like what people need to look at to make sure people are on top of the latest, newest threats, technologies, solutions, defense in depth.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think this is, I mean, we're not trying to deter anybody from using this, right? Of course, this is the way that you have to, right? Public cloud is great in so many ways. The things that it provides, it makes so much more possible and accessible in so much less time. It's just inevitable for us to use it. Now, what we're saying is, okay, how can you use it while staying secure, while staying agile, like cloud security, cloud speed, cloud costing, cloud economics, right? how can you do all of these things in a well balanced, and where all these attributes are well balanced, and you're not going gung ho on one attribute, and you're just going deep on cloud security, and you're forgetting the agility, right? The purpose that you went into the cloud. So how do you balance it across? So that's where, like Aviatrix, we come in, and that's what we do day in, day out. How can our customers leverage and get the best out of public cloud, commoditize the public cloud for their use? Means, hey, I want public cloud to come for my business, all right? I want them to fight for my business. How do I make my enterprise secure, agile, and spread in a way where I can get the best out of the public cloud while staying secure and providing the agility that my workforce and my customers need and demand, essentially? So that's essentially, I think, we're coming up to the hour. So I would say, that's the thing, that's the message from Aviatrix, that, those are the things that we focus on.
Awesome. Well, Jason, Ahmad, thank you so much for being here, sharing your information. What I'm going to do is get you guys in the lobby if you just want to wait after. I just want to catch up with you after this.
Absolutely.
So, James, what do you think about today's episode?
I think we've covered a lot of information from security to warfare to cyber intelligence, cyber hygiene. It's amazing how deep this industry really goes, and we're only touching the tip of the iceberg.
Well, you think about we covered compliance today, the CMMC, new innovation for the DoD, securing their data, securing the infrastructure, supply chain for their, procurement, as well as, design of any new technologies or solutions that they're using. We've talked about cloud security.
Response.
Sorry, was that James?
And how Canada will result from DoD relations as we move forward, and how that will actually expand around the world. It is a new age. We are in the digital age, and as the world evolves and creates, more and more people are going to create more and more problems, which we have to create solutions for. And the best way we can do that is by having these kind of meetups and passing the right information to the people who need it most.
Exactly. And then, like, I just want to finish off on my side. We kind of really talked about the cloud and what's going on with the cloud. And I think that this conversation needs to be more, because so many companies have moved to the cloud, and the limited amount of security right now, as we're finding out more and more, is not where it should be when it's 80%, 90% of companies have moved over to some sort of cloud solution.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Right. So now, James, so we have our next meeting in March.
We do. March 8th.
March 8th. So we're going to have some good speakers. Make sure anyone that's watching this right now, if you're watching this now or the recorded version, come, subscribe to our meetup group. You'll actually get it in the description. Come out. We're going to have a lot of great speakers. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity defense in depth, future solutions, new technologies. I mean, we had, encryption, cloud, CMMC. I mean, we just keep going, James.
We sure do. And we will be talking on March 8th about cyber warfare specifically, and really put in a layman's terms on it so people can understand the true situation at hand. It's something nobody wants to miss.
Oh, perfect. Well, thanks, James. I hope you have a good night.
You as well, Brandon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.